My name's Bill Peschel, and I'd like to read to you a story from the complete Annotated Deluxe Secret Adversary by Agatha Christie. Now, I'm not going to read from the story itself, but I did write an essay in the back about the 11-day disappearance Agatha Christie underwent in 1926. And I wrote it in a fictional fashion, featuring a fairly well-known detective I think you'll recognize. So he sets up the scenes. It's kind of a little bit fantasy-like. Think of it as sort of like, Doctor Who coming down and taking you away. We cruised in silence beneath the dome of starry night. We were smoothly falling from several thousand feet over southeastern England, but my stomach did not clench, nor did I feel the wind on my skin. I felt weightless, but distanced from my surroundings, as if in a dream. He explained that we were observing the world from outside time, as if from inside a bubble. We could see and hear, but we would not see nor be heard. We will feel no cold, no heat. When we move about, our brains tell us we are walking, but we are not, comprenez-vous? We believe to move our legs because that is how we have always done so. But we really move only by mind only, with the little gray cells. So, look down. What do you see? Not much. There's no moon. A few cars on the streets, the glow of lights from houses, but not many. What are these lights on the horizon? We are above Sunningdale, about 30 miles from the center of London, whose lights you observe. It is approaching 10 in the evening on Friday, December the 3rd. We touched down on a quiet street. Trees and high walls of shrubbery screened the light from the few homes whose residents were still awake. The house before us was shielded by a hedge, but from the end of the small semicircular driveway we could see the front porch. Gas lights burned in 2 of the rooms, one in front, the second upstairs. The sound of wind sending leaves skittering down the street made me shiver, even though I knew we could not feel a thing. We are on Charters Road in Sunningdale, a prosperous suburb, attracting workers from London willing to trade a train ride to live outside the city. That, he said with a touch of pride, is Styles, named for her first book, the book in which, you might say, I was born. To tell the story properly, let us consider the facts. Everything you see has happened according to her biographers. Afterwards, we shall consider the events in between and their meaning. He led me to the end of the driveway. Styles was built close to the street, so what little front yard there was had been graveled over to create a driveway. By the front door stood a 4-door car that I recognized as a Morris Cowley. He nodded at the car. Mrs. Christie bought it with the proceeds from her books, he said. In 1926, the Christies had been married for more than a decade. They had a child, Rosalind, then 6. Mr. Christie worked in the city for a financial firm. When she was not overseeing the household, with the help of a servant and her secretary, Charlotte Fisher, Mrs. Christie would spend the days writing her stories. Her latest, about the murder of Roger Ackroyd, whom I had brilliantly solved, had been published earlier that year to much acclaim and controversy. On the surface, they were living the well-regulated, sedate life many British families of her class aspired to, full of the promise of great things to come. We turned and walked down the middle of the street in front of Styles. The house disappeared behind the wall of shrubbery. The wind had died down. Apart from Poirot's voice, the silence was complete. Beneath the surface of calm domesticity, dark currents flowed. Mrs. Christie's father had died when she was a child, but the recent passing of her mother affected her more. The woman had been 72. She had lived a long, fruitful life. But mother and daughter had been unusually close, so the parting left Mrs. Christie bereft, especially because she was unable to reach her mother's bedside before she died. Alone, she took on the task of settling her mother's estate, cleaning out her childhood house, and disposing of her possessions. Next, relations between her and Mr. Christie were strained. He fell silent as he contemplated the house. Remember the saying you have, marry in haste, repent in leisure? They married during wartime, like so many couples. For years they, rubbed along, but they were not so well matched. Mr. Christie did not bear up well under stress, although he had been a pilot and earned 4 medals for bravery. He was not emotionally open. He expected his wife to be cheerful and supportive. To see her as anything other than the happy bride he married caused him distress. He took up golf and would play with friends on the weekend. Mrs. Christie tried the game, but lost interest. They grew apart. He began to spend more time in London, staying at his club during the week and coming home on weekends. It was an unhappy summer for the family, relieved for Mrs. Christie with the knowledge that in August they would celebrate Rosalind's birthday. Afterwards, she and her husband would travel to Italy for 6 weeks, and she hoped that the enforced company would bring them close together. We had reached the other opening in Styles's hedge when his monologue was interrupted by a roar of an engine. The pavement beneath our feet glowed, and our legs cast a long shadow. I turned in time to see the twin lights of the car bearing down on us. I think I screamed. I sure tried. I flung myself to one side, and while I was able to crouch, I couldn't push myself away from the path of the vehicle. My legs plunged below the surface of the road. I stared into the growing headlights, trapped, and I shut my eyes to await my fate. The whiteness blinded me, and then it vanished, leaving a reddish-brown afterglow that faded to black. "Please to recover yourself, monsieur," I heard a jovial voice say. "It was only a neighbor's vehicle. Come, stand by me." The car was gone. Most of me was as well, buried knee-deep into the asphalt. Did I not say we were outside time? Will yourself to rise, monsieur. It is not pleasant to speak to the top of your head.